Good day, everyone. So hopefully for this particular session, um, my students hopefully would be able to learn in my class and can go beyond the discourse of our subject in the contemporary world. And by the way, I'm teaching international trade and international negotiation as well, um, even as some sort of dispute and conflict resolutions. But hopefully, this particular subject may give some sort of introductions and um, some tenets of foundations or fundamentals of globalizations. So we have learned before that there is what we call the the global experience and competing conceptions of globalizations. Second, there is what we call the structures of globalizations. Third is the interstate system. And then, of course, we have the United Nations and contemporary global governance. And not last but not the least, a world of regions. So, as a recap, we have learned that the globalizations has a working definitions, and we have discussed before that there is a process of interaction and integrations among people, among companies, government, and nation to nations. There is a particular process driven by international trade and investment, aided by state-to-state informations being being under a process, a following state-to-state protocol, and it has effects on the environment, on culture, political systems, on economic and development of a state, prosperity as well, and the human physical well-being in societies around the world. And we have learned that a globalization is not quite new. For thousands of years, people and later, of course, we have uh, corporations nowadays. Uh, they're just people are into selling to each other in lands of greater distances, such as through the fame or the famous Silk Road or the Maritime Silk Road across the connect across nations, wherein China and Europe during the Middle Ages have long time interactions. So likewise for centuries, people have invested in enterprises in other countries, and in fact, most of the features of the current wave of globalization is quite similar to those prevailing before the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. Also, we have discussed about the structures of globalizations, dealing with the international trading systems, uh, what else? Bretton Woods systems, neoliberalism and its discontents, um, the global financial crisis and the challenge to neoliberalism, and of course the economic globalization today. So we have shown some videos like the globalization and the history of international trade for you to learn some of the foundations of globalizations. A particular article written by James Tobin um, was actually cascaded to you, wherein we talk about the globalizations for the world economy, and it was written in 1998. Uh, there's a particular fashion that was used by the author, and dramatically, there is a relentless connections and communications among people, regardless of nationality and geography. There is also some sort of contrast, considering that China, like Hong Kong and Taiwan, that has evidently immune uh, from the from the currency crisis that began in East Asia in 1997. But for the reason that the stability of renminbi is not a currency board authority or any other capitalist virtue, then China has has delved into this capital account or the current account convertibility, like any other European countries in the early days of the Bretton Woods. We have also shown a video about the methods of payment in international trade, um, focusing on the financial crisis at the onset of neoliberalism, and it was followed by a video centering on the neoliberalism that was released by the BBC, and of course a lecture by a well-known political philosopher, Noam Chomsky, okay, discussing some of the politics and the underlying concerns of the 1980s, early 1990s, and the current setting of trades. And there's also an article um, talking about the impact of globalizations on economic growth by Cooper and Cheng. They have discussed some terms like the foreign direct investment, what else? Technological innovation, uh, economies of sale or scale, and some risks of globalization, including interdependence, national sovereignty, equity distribution, and and I guess those three. Okay, so we have highlighted of course the term tariffs and other forms of protectionism in that particular discussions, and some future outlooks. Next next topic, I guess it's the third, about the global interstate system. Okay, talking about the attributions of the global system as of today, the interstate system, and the so-called internationalism, which is quite different from regionalism and nationalism. I was able to give to you some concepts, okay, as core periphery of discussions beyond beyond religions like Catholics and Protestants, and the current system of international trade. So we have terms like nation state, we have nation, we have state, we have concept of Europe between 1815 to 1914. We have nationalism, internationalism, liberal internationalism, socialist internationalism, world systems, um, core nation, and other peripheral nations. So hopefully these terms are of helpful tools for you to understand this that reading after that memorization or mental gymnastic um, uh, time. Okay, um, so those terms are quite helpful in the so-called readings of Mr. Dunn, Inoue, Neil, Hemlich on discussing of the development of world systems. So world systems is said to be a conceptual um, is, study of human social change, and at the same time a comparative and evolutionary perspective that is quite explained in theoretical research for studying long-term social change. So there's an approach employing the framework of comparison for studying world systems, including those hunter gatherers, okay, of the world systems. Okay, so that long article talking about the world system has two main conceptual issues which we have considered. The first is the core periphery relations, and of course the spatial bounding of the whole world systems. And of course, furthermore, there is systemic features of this world system, wherein we have learned the rise and fall of hegemonic core powers, and the so-called hegemonic sequence, wherein the core state has significantly created a greater amount of economic power than any other state, and that takes on the political role of a system leader. So we also have these two triangles: the hegemony okay, and of course the hegemonic rivalry. Okay, so we have linked to one another by the world economy and other interactions networks. And these earlier world systems were also composed of bigger picture politics, but the interaction networks that linked these politics were not intercontinental in scale, but the expansion of the Indian Ocean centered system and then European expansion to the Americans in the um, long 16th century um, made these small regional affairs important as well. But these had been growing in size with the expansion of trade networks and long distance military campaigns of millennia. That is, of course, according to Bentley and, of course, Bujard in early 1990s to 2005. Okay. And there's also another structure of a corporate or the periphery of hierarchy, wherein there's core, semi-periphery, and of course the uh, periphery. So starting in the 18th century, these peripheral regions are economically less developed in the sense that the economy is composed of relatively less capital-intensive forms of agriculture and industry, and of course some industries in peripheral countries such as oil extractions or mining may be capital intensive, but these sectors are often controlled by the core capital. Um, there was a map shown in that particular topic under Figure 3, talking about the national societies, um, like what I said earlier, the core, semi-periphery, and the periphery. And last but not the least, in that third topic, the spatial boundaries of world system was discussed, and the political slash military network was or has been uh, discussed in connection with the bulk goods or network and the prestige good networks as part of the larger information network in the boundaries of the world system. It was actually defined in there, and a more complex figure about the chronography of the rise in the central system was was of course the centerfold of that particular topic, wherein the multicentric Eurasian world systems of the 13th century was a very valuable and inspiring contributions. And at the other part of discussions of that topic in the world system, there is the East or the East and the West positions merger um, that has actually made an impact on the semi-periphery concept that was originally developed to study the modern world systems, according to Wallerstein. But um, it too has been expanded for use in comparing different kinds of systems. So another term that was actually discussed there is the so-called the hub theory of innovations, which does not well account for the spatially uneven nature of sociocultural evolutions. Okay. So as we have already said, the hypothesis of semi-peripheral development claims that many of those innovations that make it possible for the world system to get larger, more complex, and more to call this more hierarchical, are created by people in the semi-peripheral locations that some semi-peripheral politics invest in and implement transformative innovations that are borrowed from core or peripheral societies. Societies. Okay. And last but not the least, there are indicators of semi-peripherality and some geographical concerns, relative level of development, the regency of the adoption of sedentism, agricultural class formation, state formations, and the ecological marginality. Okay, that's quite long, but the results from the studies of those scale changes of politics and settlements found a greater rate in the urban cycles of the western as well as the eastern um, territory. supporting the usual notion that the West was less